Blood dripped from Ilara's knuckles as she spun to face the fourth attacker. 3 men already lay groaning on the forest floor behind her, but 2 more circled, blades gleaming under the pale moonlight. Her breath came fast and sharp. Her legs shook from exhaustion, yet her eyes stayed locked, steady, and unafraid. She had been running for almost an hour before they cornered her near the old riverbank. These were not ordinary bandits. They moved with the trained precision of hunters who knew exactly what they wanted, and what they wanted was her. Ilara gripped the broken branch she had turned into a weapon and widened her stance. She would not fall easily. She never did. Not far away, hidden by the thick trees, King Alden Vasker sat tall on his black horse, his personal guard spread out around him in a wide formation. They had been returning from inspecting the northern border when the sound of struggle reached them. At first, Alden thought it was some small skirmish among traveling merchants, but as they drew closer, what he saw made him raise a hand, silently signaling his men to stop. A lone girl, dressed in a thin, patched dress, boots worn through at the soles, was holding off 5 armed men without a single weapon of her own. No sword, no dagger, just a broken piece of wood and raw, desperate will. General Corwin, riding just behind the king, narrowed his eyes. "She should be dead already," he murmured. "Look at her stance. That's not panic. That's technique." Alden said nothing. He watched as the girl ducked under a swing, twisted her body with surprising agility, and struck her attacker across the jaw with enough force to send him stumbling into a tree. It was not luck. It was skill, raw and self-taught, but skill nonetheless. One of the remaining men lunged at her from the side. Ilara turned just in time, but not fast enough to fully avoid the blade. It grazed her arm, tearing through the fabric of her sleeve and drawing a thin line of blood. She gasped, stumbling back, but did not fall. She raised her makeshift weapon again, jaw clenched, refusing to give in to the pain. That was the moment King Alden decided he could watch no longer. "Move," he commanded, his voice low but absolute. His soldiers surged forward like a wave breaking against the shore. Within seconds, the remaining attackers realized they were outnumbered and outmatched. 2 tried to flee into the trees, only to be caught and restrained by soldiers trained for exactly this kind of pursuit. The others dropped their weapons the moment they saw the royal crest gleaming on the soldiers' armor. Ilara stood frozen, chest heaving, blood trickling down her arm, staring at the men now surrounding her. For a moment, she thought she had traded one danger for another. Her body tensed, ready to run again if she had to, even though every part of her screamed with exhaustion. King Alden dismounted and walked toward her slowly, his boots crunching against the fallen leaves. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with an aura that made even his own men straighten their backs. But Ilara did not lower her guard. She held her broken branch up, even though her arms trembled. "You're safe now," Alden said gently, though there was an edge of command beneath the softness. "Lower your weapon." "Who are you?" Ilara asked, her voice hoarse but firm. "Someone who just watched you fight off 5 men alone," he replied. "That is more impressive than most soldiers I have trained." She did not answer. Her eyes flicked toward the surrounding soldiers, counting them, calculating distances, searching for an opening. Alden noticed this immediately. It was the behavior of someone who had learned, through hard experience, that safety was never guaranteed. "You have nothing to fear from us," he said. "But you are injured. Let my healer look at your arm." "I don't need help," she said quickly, taking a step back. Behind Alden, General Corwin exchanged a glance with the other officers. It was rare, almost unheard of, for someone to refuse the king's protection. But there was something about the girl's tone that was not defiance out of pride. It was defiance built from fear, from betrayal, from a life that had taught her never to trust kindness freely offered. Alden studied her closely. Beneath the layers of dirt and exhaustion, he noticed something odd. Her posture, her breathing, the way her muscles reacted instinctively even now, still coiled and ready, despite her clear fatigue. This was not the reaction of an ordinary village girl. This was the reaction of someone who had trained, perhaps not formally, but through relentless necessity. "What is your name?" he asked. She hesitated before answering. "Ilara." "Ilara," he repeated, testing the name. "You fought 5 armed men with a broken branch and still stand on your own 2 feet. That is not something an ordinary person could do." I had no choice, she said simply. Those 4 words carried more weight than she probably intended. Alden felt something shift inside him, a flicker of understanding, though he could not yet place why her situation felt strangely personal. The captured men were bound and taken aside for questioning. One of the officers approached Alden, bowing slightly. Your Majesty, should we take these men back to the capital for interrogation? Yes, Alden replied, without turning his head, his attention still fixed on Alara. I want to know who sent them, and why they were after this girl specifically. Alara's eyes widened slightly. She had not expected the king himself, whoever this man truly was, to notice that detail. Most people who intervened in situations like this would assume she was simply unlucky, caught in a random ambush. But the way these men had moved, coordinated and precise, told a different story, one she had been trying to escape from for a long time. You knew they were after you specifically, Alden said, watching her reaction carefully. Didn't you? She said nothing, which was answer enough. You don't have to tell me now, he said, his tone softening slightly. But you cannot continue wandering through these woods alone, especially not while wounded and hunted. I've survived this long, she muttered, though her voice lacked its earlier conviction. Barely, Corwin interjected from behind Alden, his tone not unkind but blunt. 5 against 1 is not something anyone survives twice. Alara's grip on the broken branch finally loosened. Exhaustion was catching up to her, and the adrenaline that had kept her upright through the fight was beginning to fade, leaving raw pain in its place. Her legs wobbled slightly, and she reached out to steady herself against a nearby tree. Alden moved quickly, catching her elbow before she could stumble further. Easy, he said. You've lost more blood than you realize. She flinched at the contact, but did not pull away this time. Perhaps it was the exhaustion. Perhaps it was something in his voice that felt different from the countless people who had hurt her before. Either way, for the first time in years, she allowed herself, if only for a moment, to lean on someone else. We're taking you to the pack house, Alden said firmly, signaling for his healer to step forward. You need proper care. I don't belong there, she whispered, more to herself than to him. That is not for you to decide alone, Alden replied, not tonight. The healer, a middle-aged woman named Marissa, examined Alara's wound quickly, her experienced hands moving with practiced efficiency. It's not too deep, she reported, but it needs to be cleaned properly before infection sets in. Alara barely registered the words. Her mind was elsewhere, replaying the events of the past hour, trying to understand why these particular men had come for her after months of relative peace. She had been careful. She had stayed hidden. Yet somehow, they had found her. As the soldiers prepared to escort her toward the royal carriage, Alara hesitated at the edge of the clearing, looking back toward the darkened forest behind her. It had been her home, in a strange and lonely way, for longer than she cared to admit. The thought of leaving it, even temporarily, filled her with a mixture of relief and fear she could not fully explain. You're safe, Alden said again, noticing her hesitation. I promise you that. You don't know me, she said quietly. You don't know what kind of trouble follows me. I know enough, he replied. I watched you fight for your life, without hesitation, without giving up, even when the odds were completely against you. Whatever trouble follows you, I am not afraid of it. There was something in his voice, quiet confidence, mixed with genuine curiosity, that made Alara pause. She had spent years building walls around herself, learning never to trust kindness, because kindness always seemed to come with a price. But something about this man, this king, whoever he truly was, made her wonder if perhaps not every offer of help was a trap. Still, doubt lingered. She climbed into the carriage reluctantly, flanked by soldiers on either side, her body aching from the fight and her mind racing with unanswered questions. Why had those men come for her? Who had sent them? And more importantly, what would happen now that she had been pulled into the orbit of a king she knew nothing about? As the carriage began to move, Alara glanced out the small window, watching the forest disappear behind rows of trees. She did not know it yet, but this night would change everything she thought she understood about her life, her past, and the strength she had been forced to hide for so long. Behind the carriage, General Corwin rode close to King Alden, his expression thoughtful. That girl fought like someone trained for war, not survival, he said quietly. Where do you think she learned to move like that? I don't know, Alden admitted, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. But I intend to find out. You think she's connected to something bigger? I think, Alden said slowly, that we just found something far more important than we realized tonight. The carriage rolled steadily toward the pack house, carrying with it a girl whose past was shrouded in mystery, and a king whose curiosity had just been ignited in a way he had not felt in years. Neither of them could have predicted how deeply their paths were about to intertwine, nor how much both of their lives were about to change because of one fight in the dark forest that was never supposed to be witnessed by anyone at all. As they approached the gates of the pack house, tall and imposing against the night sky, Elara took a deep breath, steadying herself for whatever came next. She had survived worse than unfamiliar walls and unfamiliar faces. She told herself this was simply another challenge to overcome, another obstacle in a life defined by obstacles. But deep down, in a place she rarely allowed herself to acknowledge, a small flicker of hope stirred. Perhaps, just perhaps, this was the beginning of something different. The gates creaked open, and the carriage rolled through, carrying her toward an uncertain future that promised to be far more complicated and far more meaningful than she could have ever imagined. The pack house rose before her like something out of a dream she never allowed herself to have. Stone walls stretched high into the night sky, torches flickering along the entrance, casting long shadows across the courtyard. Elara stepped out of the carriage slowly, her legs still unsteady, her eyes scanning every corner out of pure habit. Servants and guards moved about the courtyard, pausing briefly to glance at the unfamiliar girl arriving with the king. Whispers followed her almost instantly, though she pretended not to notice. She had grown used to being watched, judged, and dismissed. This felt no different, except for the scale of it. "This way," Alden said, gesturing toward the main entrance. His tone remained calm, though his eyes never fully left her, as if he expected her to bolt at any moment. Elara hesitated at the doorway, her fingers brushing against the torn fabric of her sleeve. "I don't have anything," she said quietly. "No coin, no way to repay you for this." "I'm not asking for repayment," Alden replied. "You need care, that is all." She wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could manage on her own as she always had, but her body betrayed her the moment she took a step forward. A sharp pain shot through her injured arm, and her vision blurred slightly at the edges. Before she could stumble, a firm hand steadied her shoulder. "Careful," Alden said, his voice quieter now, almost private amid the bustling courtyard. She straightened immediately, pulling away from his touch, embarrassed by her own weakness. "I'm fine." "You're not," he said simply, without judgment, and there's no shame in that. Marissa, the healer, appeared beside them, her expression kind, but professional. "Let's get her inside, before that wound worsens," she said, already reaching for Elara's arm gently. Reluctantly, Elara allowed herself to be led through wide corridors lined with tapestries and portraits of past leaders. The pack house was grander than anything she had ever stepped foot in, and despite her exhaustion, she could not help but notice every detail, every possible exit, every guard positioned along the walls. Old habits were difficult to abandon, especially when survival had depended on them for so long. They arrived at a small private room, where Marissa began cleaning her wound with practiced efficiency. Elara winced as the antiseptic touched broken skin, but she remained silent, staring at the wall ahead, lost in thought. "You've had wounds like this before," Marissa observed, noting the faint scars scattered across Elara's arms and shoulders, remnants of battles fought long before tonight. "More than I can count," Elara admitted quietly. Marissa did not push further, though her eyes lingered on the scars a moment longer than necessary. She had seen many wounds in her years serving the pack, but rarely had she seen a young woman carrying so many marks of survival, without a single soldier's rank or formal training to explain them. Outside the room, Alden stood with General Corwin, discussing matters in hushed tones. "Any leads on who those men were working for?" Alden asked. "Not yet," Corwin replied. "They refused to speak, at least for now. But my instincts tell me this wasn't random. Whoever sent them wanted her specifically, and they wanted her alive." Alden's jaw tightened at the thought. "Then we need answers quickly." "Perhaps the girl herself might have some idea," Corwin suggested carefully, though pushing her too soon could make her retreat further into silence. Alden nodded slowly, understanding the delicate balance required. Something about Ilara's guarded nature told him that trust, if it ever came, would have to be earned patiently, not forced. Inside the room, Marissa finished bandaging the wound and offered Ilara a change of clothes, simple but clean, a stark contrast to the tattered dress she had worn for longer than she cared to admit. Ilara accepted them silently, grateful despite herself. "You can rest here tonight," Marissa said gently. "No one will disturb you." "Thank you," Ilara replied, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. Gratitude had rarely been directed at anyone in her life, and expressing it now felt strange, almost vulnerable. Left alone in the quiet room, Ilara sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her bandaged arm. The events of the night replayed in her mind, the attack, the sudden intervention, the strange kindness of a king she knew nothing about. Every instinct told her to be cautious, to trust nothing so easily given. Yet exhaustion eventually won over suspicion, and she allowed herself to lie down, if only for a few hours of much-needed rest. The following morning, sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the unfamiliar room in soft golden light. Ilara woke with a start, momentarily disoriented, before memories of the previous night settled back into place. She sat up slowly, testing her injured arm, relieved to find the pain had lessened considerably. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she said cautiously. It was Alden, dressed casually compared to the previous night, though his presence still commanded a quiet authority. "I hope you slept well," he said. "Better than expected," she admitted. "I wanted to check on you before council matters begin," he continued. "How is your arm?" "Healing," she replied simply. He studied her for a moment, noticing the way she sat rigidly, ready to react at the slightest provocation, even in a room meant for rest and recovery. "You don't trust easily, do you?" "Trust has rarely served me well," she said honestly. Alden nodded, understanding more than his expression revealed. "I won't pretend to know what you've been through, but you're safe here, for as long as you need." "I can't stay forever," she said quickly. "I don't belong in a place like this." "Perhaps not yet," Alden replied thoughtfully. "But last night, you fought like someone who has faced far worse than 5 armed men. That is not something learned overnight, nor something easily ignored." Ilara's expression hardened slightly. "It's not something I'm proud of." "I didn't say it was," Alden said gently. "But it is impressive, regardless of the circumstances that taught you." Their conversation was interrupted by a soft knock, followed by Corwin stepping inside, his expression serious. "Your Majesty, we've learned something from one of the captured men." Alden's posture straightened immediately. "What did he say?" Corwin glanced briefly at Ilara before answering carefully. "He mentioned a name, Draven." Ilara's entire body went rigid at the mention of that name, her breath catching sharply in her throat. Alden noticed the reaction instantly. "You know that name," he said, not as a question, but as a certainty. Ilara's hands trembled slightly as she clenched them into fists. "I thought he was gone," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else in the room. "Who is Draven?" Alden asked carefully, his voice steady, despite the sudden tension filling the room. Ilara remained silent for a long moment, wrestling internally, with years of buried pain and fear. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was my former alpha, the one who cast me out." The room fell into heavy silence, as the weight of her words settled over everyone present. Alden exchanged a quick glance with Corwin, both of them realizing that whatever had brought those attackers into the forest last night was far more complicated, and far more dangerous, than a simple case of random violence. "He shouldn't know where I am," Ilara continued, her voice growing steadier despite the fear lingering beneath it. "I made sure of that. I stayed hidden for years." "Clearly not hidden enough," Corwin said grimly. Alden stepped closer, his expression calm but resolute. "Whatever reason he has for hunting you, know this. You are under my protection now. He will not reach you here." Ilara looked up at him, searching his eyes for any hint of deception, any sign that his words were simply empty promises, meant to placate her. But all she found was quiet determination, the same resolve she had witnessed the previous night when he ordered his soldiers to intervene without hesitation. "Why would you protect someone you barely know?" she asked, genuine confusion coloring her tone. Because, Alden said simply, no one deserves to be hunted alone, especially not someone who has clearly already survived more than most people ever will. For the first time since arriving at the pack house, Elara allowed herself to believe, if only slightly, that perhaps this unexpected turn of events was not another trap waiting to close around her. Perhaps, for the first time in years, she had found someone willing to stand beside her rather than against her. But as the name Draven lingered in the air between them, she knew this fragile sense of safety would not last long. Whatever her former alpha wanted from her, he would not stop until he found her again. And when he did, she would need every ounce of strength she possessed, along with whatever unexpected alliance was forming within these unfamiliar walls, to survive what was coming next. Days passed slowly inside the pack house, though Elara found it difficult to settle into any sense of routine. Every creak of the floorboards, every unfamiliar voice echoing down the corridor, sent her senses on alert. Old habits refused to fade, simply because her surroundings had changed. She spent most mornings sitting near the window of her assigned room, watching soldiers train in the courtyard below. Their movements were disciplined, coordinated, nothing like the desperate, self-taught techniques she had relied upon her entire life. Still, she noticed flaws in their formations, weaknesses she doubted anyone else had considered. One afternoon, General Corwin found her watching the training session with unusual focus. "You seem interested," he remarked, leaning against the doorway. "They leave their left side exposed during transition," she said, without turning to look at him. "During the third rotation. It's small, but a trained opponent could exploit it easily." Corwin raised an eyebrow, surprised by both her observation and the confidence behind it. "You noticed that in a single session?" "I've had to notice things like that my whole life," she replied simply. "Missing a detail like that could mean losing a fight." Corwin studied her for a long moment before speaking again. "Where did you learn to fight the way you do? No formal training, yet you moved with more precision than half the soldiers down there." Elara's expression grew guarded. "Necessity teaches quickly when there's no one else to protect you." Her words carried a weight that silenced any further questions Corwin might have asked. He nodded slowly, understanding that whatever her past held, it was not something she was ready to share freely. Later that day, Alden requested her presence in his private study, a quiet room, lined with maps and old records. Elara entered cautiously, unfamiliar with the formality of royal spaces, though she masked her unease well. "You wanted to see me?" she asked. "I did," Alden replied, gesturing toward a chair across from his desk. "I've been thinking about what Corwin mentioned. Your instincts, your combat awareness. It's unusual for someone without formal training." "I told you," she said, sitting down reluctantly. "I learned out of necessity." "I understand that," Alden said carefully. "But I'd like to understand more about your past, if you're willing to share it. Not to pry, but because understanding the threat against you requires understanding where it began." Elara remained silent for a long moment, weighing her options. She had spent years avoiding conversations like this, protecting herself by keeping her past buried deep enough that no one could use it against her. But something about Alden's steady patience made her reconsider, if only slightly. "My family was part of Draven's pack," she began slowly. "We weren't wealthy, weren't influential. My father served as a low-ranking guard, and my mother worked within the pack house kitchens." Alden listened intently, careful not to interrupt. "When I was young, my wolf awakened differently than most," she continued, "weaker, at least outwardly. Draven declared me an Omega, unworthy of respect or protection within the pack hierarchy. My family was shamed alongside me." "That must have been difficult," Alden said quietly. "It was survival," she corrected. "Being labeled weak meant being denied resources, protection, even basic respect from other pack members. I learned quickly that if I wanted to survive, I had to become someone capable of protecting myself, regardless of what title I was given." "And your family?" Alden asked gently. Elara's expression darkened. "They tried to protect me for a while, but eventually, keeping me close became too dangerous for them. Draven exiled me when I was barely 16, claiming my presence brought weakness to the pack." The room fell silent as the weight of her words settled between them. Alden felt something tighten within his chest, a mixture of anger toward a man he had never met, and quiet admiration for the resilience of the woman sitting before him. "You survived alone since then?" he asked. Mostly, she said. I learned to fight, to hunt, to disappear whenever necessary. It wasn't a life anyone would envy, but it was mine. Why would Draven send men after you now, after all these years? Alden asked, more to himself than to her. Alara hesitated before answering. I don't know, unless he discovered something about my wolf that he didn't know before. What do you mean? She took a deep breath, clearly debating how much more to reveal. My wolf isn't weak, she admitted finally. It never was. I suppressed it deliberately, years ago. After an incident I still don't fully understand myself. If Draven somehow learned the truth about my strength, it would explain why he suddenly wants me found. Alden's expression sharpened with interest. What kind of incident? I lost control once, she said quietly. It frightened me enough that I chose to suppress my wolf entirely, rather than risk something like that happening again. Before Alden could ask further questions, a soft knock interrupted their conversation. Corwin entered, his expression tense. Your Majesty, we've received word from one of our scouts. Draven's men have been spotted near the eastern border, moving in small groups. Alden's expression hardened immediately. How many? At least a dozen so far, Corwin replied. They're moving cautiously, likely testing our defenses before deciding on a larger move. Alara stood abruptly, her earlier vulnerability replaced instantly by sharp alertness. He's coming for me directly this time. You don't know that for certain, Alden said, though his tone lacked full conviction. I know Draven, she replied firmly. He doesn't send scouts unless he's planning something larger. He wants to know exactly where I am, and how well protected I've become. Corwin glanced between them before speaking again. Your Majesty, should we increase security around the pack house? Immediately, Alden replied without hesitation. And send word to our allies along the border. I want eyes on every possible approach. As Corwin departed to relay the orders, Alden turned back toward Alara, noticing the tension radiating from her stance. You don't have to face this alone anymore, he said firmly. You don't understand what he's capable of, she replied, her voice edged with fear she rarely allowed herself to express. He wouldn't send a dozen scouts unless he was certain of victory. Then we'll make certain he's wrong, Alden said, his tone leaving no room for doubt. Alara studied him carefully, searching once again for any hint of empty bravado behind his words, but all she found was steady resolve, the same unwavering determination that had convinced his own soldiers to follow him without question. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. Why risk your own pack's safety for someone you barely know? Alden considered his answer carefully before speaking. Because the moment I saw you fighting alone in that forest, I understood something important. Strength isn't measured by titles or bloodlines. It's measured by resilience, by the will to survive, despite everything working against you. You've shown more of that in one night than most people show in a lifetime. His words settled deeply within her, breaking through walls she had spent years reinforcing. For the first time since her exile, Alara felt something she had almost forgotten existed, the faint possibility of genuine allyship, perhaps even something resembling belonging. But as reports of Draven's scouts continued trickling in throughout the following days, the fragile peace surrounding the pack house grew increasingly tense. Alara knew, deep within her bones, that whatever safety she had found here would soon be tested in ways she could not yet fully predict. And somewhere beyond the borders of the pack house, Draven's forces continued their slow, calculated approach, patiently waiting for the perfect moment to strike. News of Draven's scouts spread quickly through the pack house, prompting whispered conversations among soldiers and staff alike. Alara felt the weight of curious glances following her through the corridors, some filled with suspicion, others with quiet sympathy. She ignored them as best she could, focusing instead on the growing tension gripping the household. Alden called an emergency council meeting the following morning, gathering his most trusted advisors and generals within the war room. Alara stood near the back, uncertain of her place among the seasoned leaders discussing strategy and defense. Our scouts confirm at least 15 of Draven's men are positioned near the eastern ridge, Corwin reported, pointing toward a detailed map spread across the table. They've made no aggressive moves yet, but their presence alone suggests they're preparing for something larger. Could this be a distraction? Asked another officer, a stern woman named Bridget, drawing our attention east while planning an attack elsewhere. It's possible, Alden replied thoughtfully, But Draven's reputation suggests he prefers direct confrontation once he's certain of his position. Alara stepped forward slightly, drawing surprised glances from several officers unaccustomed to her voice within these discussions. "He won't attack directly, not yet," she said firmly. "He'll wait until he's certain I haven't left the pack house. He wants confirmation before committing his forces." "How can you be certain of that?" Bridget asked, skepticism evident in her tone. "Because that's how he operates," Alara replied. "He never moves without absolute certainty of victory. It's why he exiled me quietly instead of publicly, to avoid any perception of weakness within his own pack." Alden studied her carefully, appreciating the insight she offered, despite her clear discomfort standing among seasoned military leaders. "If that's true, then we have time to prepare properly before he commits fully." "Time, yes," Alara said, "but not much. Once he's certain of my location, he won't hesitate." The council continued discussing logistics, positioning additional guards along vulnerable points surrounding the pack house. Alara listened carefully, occasionally offering insight based on years of survival instincts, sharpened through necessity rather than formal training. After the meeting concluded, Alden approached her quietly. "You handled yourself well in there," he said. "I only said what I know to be true," she replied modestly. "That's exactly why it mattered," Alden said. "Experience like yours can't be taught in training halls." Alara offered a small, hesitant smile, unfamiliar with genuine praise after years of isolation. "I'm not used to being listened to," she admitted quietly. "That will change here," Alden said firmly. "You've earned your place in that room today." Over the following days, Alara found herself gradually drawn into the daily rhythms of packhouse life, despite her initial reluctance. She began assisting training sessions, offering subtle corrections to soldiers eager to improve their combat readiness. Her insights, born from years of desperate survival, proved invaluable in identifying weaknesses previously overlooked by even experienced trainers. Corwin, initially skeptical of her presence, grew increasingly respectful as her contributions became evident. "You've got sharp eyes," he admitted one afternoon, watching her correct a young soldier's stance. "Where you learned this? It's a shame it had to come from suffering." "Suffering teaches lessons kindness never could," Alara replied simply, though her tone carried no bitterness, only quiet acceptance of the life she had endured. As days passed, Alara noticed subtle changes within herself as well. The constant vigilance she had carried for years began, ever so slightly, to soften. She still remained alert, still calculated escape routes instinctively whenever entering new rooms, but the crushing weight of complete isolation had begun to lift, replaced gradually by cautious trust in those around her. One evening, as she walked along the quiet corridors after another long day of training, she encountered Alden standing alone near a window overlooking the courtyard, lost in thought. "Trouble sleeping?" she asked, surprising even herself with the casual familiarity of her tone. "Something like that," Alden admitted, glancing toward her with a faint smile. "Leadership rarely allows peaceful nights, especially with threats looming so close." "You seem to carry that weight well," she observed. "Practice," he replied simply. "Though tonight, my thoughts were elsewhere." "Care to share?" she asked, though she immediately wondered if she had overstepped some unspoken boundary. Alden considered her question carefully before answering. "I was thinking about you, actually. About how quickly you've adapted here, despite everything you've endured." Alara felt a flush of unfamiliar warmth at his words, quickly masked by her usual guarded demeanor. "I haven't had much choice but to adapt quickly my entire life." "That's precisely what impresses me," Alden said. "Most people, faced with your circumstances, would have broken long ago, yet here you stand, stronger than ever." "I don't feel particularly strong," she admitted quietly. "Most days, I feel like I'm barely holding everything together." "Strength isn't the absence of struggle," Alden replied gently. "It's continuing forward despite it." His words resonated deeply within her, echoing sentiments she had never dared to voice aloud, even to herself. For a brief moment, standing quietly beside him in the dim corridor, Alara allowed herself to feel something dangerously close to genuine connection. But their quiet moment was interrupted abruptly by a soldier rushing toward them, urgency evident in his hurried steps. "Your Majesty, Corwin sent me. Draven's scouts have retreated from the eastern ridge." Alden's expression sharpened instantly. "Retreated?" Entirely? Yes, sir. No trace of them remains. Ilara's stomach tightened uneasily at the news. That's not good, she said quietly. Why? Alden asked, turning toward her. Because Draven doesn't retreat without reason, she explained. If he's pulled his scouts back completely, it means he's already gathered the information he needed. Meaning? He knows exactly where I am now, Ilara said grimly, and he's preparing for something far larger than scouting. Alden's jaw tightened, his earlier calm replaced instantly by focused determination. Then we prepare accordingly, he said firmly. Double the guards immediately. I want every possible entry point secured by morning. As soldiers scrambled to follow his orders, Ilara felt the familiar tension of impending danger settle heavily across her shoulders once again. Yet this time, unlike countless nights before, she did not feel entirely alone in facing it. Standing beside Alden amid the sudden flurry of activity, she realized, with quiet surprise, that she had begun to trust not just his protection, but his genuine concern for her well-being. It was a fragile trust, built cautiously over mere days, yet it felt more solid than anything she had experienced in years. Still, as night deepened and preparations continued around them, Ilara understood clearly that whatever safety she had found within these walls would soon be tested in ways neither she nor Alden could fully anticipate. Draven was coming, and this time, he would not stop until he achieved exactly what he sought. The question remaining now was simple, yet terrifying in its implications. Would the strength she had built alone, combined with the unexpected alliance she had found here, be enough to finally end the shadow that had haunted her for so long? The pack house transformed overnight into a fortress of quiet urgency. Guards patrolled every corridor, extra sentries lined the outer walls, and soldiers moved with sharpened focus, aware that whatever calm had existed before was now firmly behind them. Ilara watched the preparations unfold from her window, her mind racing through every possible scenario Draven might attempt. Despite the mounting tension, Alden insisted she continue her involvement in training sessions, recognizing that idle waiting would only intensify her anxiety. Movement keeps the mind sharp, he told her one morning. Better to stay prepared than to sit and imagine every possible outcome. She appreciated his understanding more than she expressed aloud. Training gave her purpose, a way to channel restless energy into something productive, rather than allowing fear to consume her thoughts entirely. During one session, Corwin approached her with an unusual request. The king believes it's time you trained your wolf properly, he said carefully, watching her reaction closely. Not just physical combat, but full acceptance of your abilities. Ilara stiffened immediately. I told him I suppressed it for a reason. He understands that, Corwin replied. But if Draven is preparing an attack, hiding your true strength might not be an option much longer. She considered his words carefully, old fears resurfacing painfully. The incident that led her to suppress her wolf years ago still haunted her, a moment of uncontrolled power that had frightened her deeply enough to lock that part of herself away entirely. Later that day, Alden found her sitting alone near the training grounds, lost in troubled thought. He sat down beside her without a word, giving her space to speak when she felt ready. I was 15, she finally said quietly. The first time my wolf fully surfaced, I didn't know how to control it yet. Someone provoked me, mocked my status as an Omega, laughed at my family's shame. I lost control completely. Alden listened patiently, sensing the difficulty behind each word she spoke. I hurt him badly, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. Not intentionally, but severely enough that Draven used the incident as justification for my exile. He called me dangerous, unstable, unworthy of pack protection. That must have been terrifying, Alden said gently. It was, she admitted, not just because of what happened, but because of how much power I felt in that moment. Power I couldn't control, power that frightened even me. You were 15, Alden said firmly, untrained, unsupported, thrown into a situation you weren't prepared to handle. That isn't weakness, Ilara. That's exactly why proper training exists, to prevent moments like that from happening again. She looked at him carefully, searching for judgment or fear in his expression, finding instead only patient understanding. You're not afraid of what I might become? I've seen true monsters, Alden replied firmly. You are nothing like them. What happened wasn't malice, it was fear, and inexperience colliding without guidance. With proper training, that power could become your greatest strength rather than something to fear. His words settled deeply within her, challenging years of self-doubt she had carried since her exile. Perhaps, she considered cautiously, her wolf wasn't something dangerous to be feared, but rather something she had simply never been taught to understand properly. "Will you help me?" she asked quietly, surprising herself with the vulnerability behind her request. "Absolutely," Alden replied without hesitation. Over the following days, Alden personally guided her through careful exercises designed to help her reconnect safely with her suppressed wolf. Progress came slowly at first. Cautious steps forward followed occasionally by moments of fear that made her retreat instinctively. "You're safe here," Alden reminded her repeatedly during each session. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." Gradually, Elara began sensing subtle shifts within herself, a warmth spreading gently beneath her skin, no longer entirely foreign or threatening. She practiced small, controlled releases of her wolf's energy, guided carefully by Alden's steady presence beside her. "You're doing remarkably well," he encouraged one afternoon, watching as she successfully controlled a brief partial shift without losing composure. "It feels different than I remembered," she admitted, slightly breathless from the effort, less overwhelming. "Because now you have guidance," Alden explained. "Understanding your strength doesn't mean losing control. It means learning exactly how to wield it responsibly." As days passed, their training sessions became more than simple exercises in control. They became moments of genuine connection, quiet conversations exchanged between exercises, small glimpses into each other's pasts and hopes for the future. "You've never told me why you became king," Elara said one afternoon, curiosity finally overcoming her usual reserve. Alden considered her question thoughtfully before responding. "My father died unexpectedly when I was young. Leadership fell upon me sooner than I was prepared for. I made mistakes early on, learned through trial and error what true leadership required." "And what does it require?" she asked. "Patience," he replied simply, "understanding that strength isn't measured by power alone, but by how carefully and fairly that power is used." His answer resonated deeply with her, reflecting sentiments she had begun to understand more clearly through their shared training sessions. Perhaps, she considered quietly, true strength had never been about avoiding vulnerability entirely, but rather about facing it honestly, with careful guidance and genuine support. As their bond deepened through continued training, whispers began circulating quietly throughout the pack house, subtle speculation regarding the growing closeness between their king and the mysterious girl he had rescued from the forest. Elara noticed the whispers but chose largely to ignore them, focusing instead on the genuine progress she felt within herself. Yet despite this newfound sense of hopeful connection, the looming threat of Draven's impending attack remained a persistent shadow over their progress. Reports continued trickling in of suspicious movements along the borders, subtle signs suggesting Draven's forces were preparing methodically for a larger confrontation. One evening, following another successful training session, Alden turned toward her with quiet seriousness. "Elara, whatever happens when Draven finally makes his move, know that you are no longer facing this alone." She met his gaze steadily, feeling a warmth of genuine gratitude and something deeper, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything you've done and everything you continue to do." "You've done the hardest part yourself," Alden replied gently. "Facing your fears, embracing strength you were taught to suppress. I've simply offered guidance along the way." As their training continued, Elara felt herself growing steadily more confident, both in her physical abilities and in her cautious trust toward those around her. Yet she remained acutely aware that whatever peace she had discovered within these walls would soon be tested by the very threat that had brought her here in the first place. Draven was coming, and this time, she intended to face him not as the frightened, exiled girl he once dismissed, but as someone finally prepared to reclaim the strength and identity he had tried so desperately to take from her. Weeks passed, and the pack house settled into a tense rhythm of preparation and quiet anticipation. Elara's training progressed steadily, her control over her wolf growing stronger with each passing session. What once felt like a dangerous, uncontrollable force now felt like a natural extension of herself, something she could summon and restrain with growing confidence. Corwin, who had initially approached her with cautious skepticism, now regarded her with genuine respect. "You've improved faster than most trained warriors I've overseen," he admitted one afternoon, watching her complete a demanding series of exercises without hesitation. "I had good reason to push myself," she replied, wiping sweat from her brow. "Draven, you mean," Corwin said, his tone growing serious. "Among other things," she said quietly, though her thoughts drifted briefly toward Alden, whose presence had become an unexpected source of strength throughout her difficult journey toward self-acceptance. Their relationship had shifted subtly over the weeks, evolving from cautious alliance into something neither of them had explicitly named, yet both clearly recognized. Small moments, shared glances during training, quiet conversations late into the evening, had gradually built a foundation of genuine trust and affection between them. One evening, following another intense training session, Alden found her sitting alone near the edge of the training grounds, staring thoughtfully toward the darkening horizon. "You seem troubled," he observed, sitting down beside her. "Just thinking," she admitted, "about everything that's happened since that night in the forest." "Regrets?" he asked gently. "None," she replied firmly. "Just surprise at how much things have changed in such a short time." Alden studied her carefully, noticing subtle changes in her demeanor since their first encounter. Gone was the constant wariness that had defined her every movement upon arrival. In its place stood quiet confidence, tempered by genuine warmth she rarely allowed herself to express so openly. "You've changed a great deal," he said softly. "So have you," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "You're not quite the intimidating king I first assumed you to be." He chuckled softly at her honesty. "Is that a compliment?" "Perhaps," she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Their quiet moment was interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps approaching. Corwin appeared, his expression grave. "Your Majesty, we've received disturbing news." Alden stood immediately, his relaxed demeanor replaced instantly by sharp attentiveness. "What is it?" "Draven has gathered a significant force near the western border," Corwin reported. "Scouts estimate at least 50 warriors, possibly more." Alara's breath caught sharply. 50 warriors was far more than mere scouting. It signaled Draven's clear intention toward direct confrontation. "When do you expect them to move?" Alden asked. "Within days, perhaps sooner," Corwin replied grimly. Alden turned toward Alara, his expression steady, despite the gravity of the news. "We knew this moment would come eventually." "I'm ready," she said firmly, though a flicker of fear remained evident beneath her resolve. "You don't have to face him directly," Alden said carefully. "We can position you safely away from the front lines." "No," Alara replied immediately, her tone resolute. "This is my fight as much as it is yours. I won't hide while others risk their lives because of me." Alden studied her closely, recognizing the fierce determination behind her words, yet clearly torn between respecting her wishes and protecting her from unnecessary danger. "If you fight alongside experienced warriors, under careful guidance. I won't allow you to face him recklessly." "Understood," she agreed, appreciating his concern despite her own eagerness to confront the past that had haunted her for so long. Over the following days, preparations intensified throughout the pack house. Soldiers trained rigorously, strategists debated defensive formations, and Alara continued refining her control, determined to ensure she would be ready when Draven's forces finally arrived. During one such preparation session, Marissa approached her quietly, concern evident in her expression. "You seem determined to face him directly," she observed. "I have to," Alara replied simply. "He's haunted my life long enough. It's time I confront that fear directly, rather than allowing it to control me any further." "Just be careful," Marissa cautioned gently. "Vengeance can cloud judgment, even for the most disciplined warriors." "This isn't about vengeance," Alara clarified thoughtfully. "It's about reclaiming what he tried to take from me. My strength, my identity, my right to exist without fear." Marissa nodded understandingly, recognizing the clarity and resolve behind Alara's words. As the day of confrontation approached, tension within the pack house grew increasingly palpable. Soldiers moved with heightened alertness, preparing meticulously for battle. Alara continued her training relentlessly, determined to ensure her wolf's strength remained firmly under her control. The night before Draven's anticipated arrival, Alden found her alone once more, staring silently toward the horizon where the enemy forces awaited. "Are you afraid?" he asked quietly, standing beside her. "Terrified," she admitted honestly, but not of Draven himself, rather, of losing control again, hurting someone unintentionally, becoming exactly what he always claimed I was. "You won't," Alden reassured her firmly. "You've grown far beyond that fear. Your control today is far stronger than it ever was before." "I hope you're right," she said softly. "I know I am," Alden replied confidently. "I've watched your progress closely. You're not the same frightened girl who arrived here weeks ago. You've become someone capable of facing your fears directly, with strength and clarity." His words offered comfort, steadying her nerves, as the moment of confrontation drew ever closer. Standing quietly beside him, beneath the vast night sky, Elara felt a profound sense of readiness settle deeply within her, replacing lingering doubts with quiet determination. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she said softly, "thank you, Alden, for believing in me when I struggled to believe in myself." "You've earned that belief," he replied gently. "Tomorrow, you'll prove it not just to Draven, but to yourself as well." As dawn approached, the packhouse prepared silently for the battle ahead, every soldier keenly aware of the significance of the confrontation soon to unfold. Elara stood among them, no longer the frightened exile who had once fought desperately alone in a forest clearing, but a warrior fully prepared to reclaim her strength, her identity, and her rightful place among those who now stood firmly beside her. The dawn light broke slowly over the horizon, illuminating the packhouse grounds where soldiers stood ready, weapons prepared, eyes fixed steadily on the distant tree line where Draven's forces would soon emerge. Elara felt her heart pounding steadily, adrenaline coursing through her veins, as she awaited the moment she had both feared and anticipated for years. Beside her, Alden stood resolute, his presence offering silent reassurance amid the mounting tension. Together, they awaited the arrival of a past neither could ignore any longer, ready finally to confront it head-on, side by side. The tree line stirred with movement, as the first ranks of Draven's warriors emerged into the open field bordering the packhouse. Elara counted them silently, her senses sharpened by weeks of disciplined training. 50, perhaps more, moving with practiced formation, banners bearing a crest she recognized instantly from her childhood. Beside her, soldiers shifted their stances, readying weapons while maintaining the disciplined formation Corwin had drilled into them for days. Alden stood at the front, his expression calm despite the gravity of the moment, radiating quiet authority that steadied the nerves of everyone around him. A single rider broke away from the approaching force, moving forward alone, until he stopped a fair distance from the packhouse line. Even from afar, Elara recognized him instantly. Draven, older than she remembered, his features harder, colder, yet unmistakably the same man who had exiled her years before. "Elara," Draven called out, his voice carrying easily across the open field. "I see you found new protectors." She stepped forward slightly, ignoring the tension rippling through the soldiers around her. "What do you want, Draven?" "You know what I want," he replied coldly. "Your wolf. The strength you've hidden from everyone, including yourself, for years." "You cast me out because you feared that strength," she said firmly. "Now you want to claim it?" "Circumstances change," Draven replied simply. "My pack requires strength I no longer possess naturally. Yours, however, remains untapped, wasted on isolation and fear." Alden stepped forward beside her, his presence firm and protective. "She belongs to no one but herself," he said clearly. "You have no claim here." Draven's gaze shifted toward Alden, assessing him carefully. The Alpha King himself, defending an Omega he barely knows. How touching. "She is far more than an Omega," Alden replied evenly. "And you will find no easy victory here." Draven's lips curled into a cold smile. "We shall see." Without further warning, he signaled his forces forward, and the battlefield erupted into sudden chaos. Soldiers clashed against soldiers, shouts and clangs of weapons filling the air, as both sides engaged fiercely. Elara felt her heart racing, adrenaline surging through her veins as she prepared to enter the fray herself. "Stay close," Alden instructed firmly, positioning himself protectively near her side as they moved into the battle together. The fighting proved fierce. Both sides matched closely in skill and determination. Elara fought alongside Alden's soldiers, her movements precise and controlled. Years of self-taught survival, combined seamlessly with weeks of disciplined training. She disarmed opponents swiftly, careful to avoid unnecessary harm whenever possible, focused instead on protecting those around her. Draven, meanwhile, remained at the edge of the battlefield, observing carefully, waiting patiently for the moment he deemed most opportune to intervene directly. His patience, however, was soon rewarded, as he spotted Elara moving confidently through the chaos, her control evident, despite the intensity surrounding her. "Impressive," he murmured to himself, stepping forward deliberately toward the heart of the conflict. Alden noticed Draven's approach instantly, moving swiftly to intercept him before he could reach Elara directly. "Your fight is with me now," Alden declared firmly, positioning himself protectively between Draven and Elara. Draven studied him carefully, assessing the challenge before him. "Very well," he replied coldly. "Let's settle this properly." Their confrontation began fiercely, blades clashing with precision and skill. Alden fought with disciplined determination, years of leadership and training, evident in every calculated movement. Draven, however, proved a formidable opponent, his own experience and ruthlessness matching Alden's skill closely. Elara watched anxiously from nearby, torn between assisting Alden directly and continuing to protect the soldiers around her. Yet as she observed the intensity of their battle, she recognized clearly that this confrontation was deeply personal, a culmination of years of tension, finally reaching its inevitable conclusion. The battle raged fiercely around them, soldiers clashing fiercely on both sides, yet Elara's attention remained fixed firmly upon Alden and Draven's intense confrontation. She watched anxiously as Alden skillfully countered each of Draven's attacks, yet she sensed clearly that Draven's ruthlessness might soon prove too much even for Alden's disciplined skill. Unable to remain idle any longer, Elara moved swiftly toward their confrontation, determined to intervene, before Alden faced unnecessary danger on her behalf. As she approached, Draven noticed her sudden movement, his attention shifting instantly toward her. "Ah," he said, smiling coldly. "Finally ready to face me yourself?" "This ends today," Elara declared firmly, positioning herself protectively beside Alden. Draven studied her carefully, recognizing clearly the strength and confidence radiating from her now, vastly different from the frightened girl he once exiled. "Interesting," he murmured. "Let's see exactly how far you've come." Their confrontation intensified swiftly, Elara and Alden fighting together against Draven's relentless assault. Elara's movements remained precise and controlled, years of disciplined training evident in every calculated strike, while Alden's steady presence beside her provided reassurance and strength. Despite Draven's considerable skill, the combined strength and precision of Elara and Alden's coordinated efforts began steadily overwhelming him. Sensing the shifting tide of battle, Draven's confidence wavered slightly, though his determination remained fierce. "You've grown stronger," he admitted grudgingly, breathing heavily from the intensity of their confrontation. "I had good reason to," Elara replied firmly, her voice steady despite the exhaustion evident from the prolonged battle. Sensing the battle turning decisively against him, Draven's forces began retreating gradually, recognizing the shifting balance of power clearly evident throughout the battlefield. Yet Draven himself remained resolute, unwilling to accept defeat so easily. "This isn't over," he declared fiercely, preparing for one final, desperate assault. Elara and Alden exchanged a brief glance, silently acknowledging their shared resolve to end this confrontation decisively, once and for all. Draven surged forward with renewed ferocity, his desperation evident in every reckless movement. Elara braced herself, recalling every lesson she had absorbed during weeks of careful training. This was no longer the uncontrolled fear that had once defined her, but calculated readiness born from discipline and trust. Alden moved in tandem beside her, their coordination refined through countless hours spent training together. Where Draven attacked with brute aggression, they responded with precision, each movement measured, each block deliberate. "You always believed strength meant dominance," Elara said, deflecting a heavy strike aimed toward her shoulder. "You never understood that real strength comes from control." Draven snarled, swinging again, but Elara sidestepped smoothly, countering with a strike that forced him back a step. Around them, the remaining skirmishes on the battlefield were dying down, soldiers on both sides pausing to watch the pivotal confrontation unfolding at its center. "You were nothing when I exiled you," Draven spat, though his voice carried less conviction than before. A frightened child, unable to control her own wolf. That child grew up, Elara replied evenly, because I had no other choice. Sensing an opening, Alden lunged forward, disarming Draven's weapon, with a swift, calculated strike. The blade clattered to the ground, and for a brief moment, Draven stood exposed, breathing heavily, his earlier confidence rapidly draining away. It's over, Alden said firmly, his blade steady against Draven's throat. Draven's eyes flicked toward Elara, searching for any lingering trace of the fear he once relied upon to control her. He found none. Instead, he saw calm resolve, quiet strength, and something he had never expected to witness in the girl he once dismissed so easily, genuine peace. You could have simply let me leave, Draven said quietly, resignation settling into his voice. Why fight so hard to protect someone who owes you nothing? Because unlike you, Alden replied firmly, I understand that true leadership means protecting those who need it, not exploiting their vulnerabilities for personal gain. Draven remained silent, defeat evident in his posture, as soldiers from the pack house moved forward to restrain him properly. His remaining warriors, witnessing his defeat, quickly surrendered, recognizing the futility of continuing their assault. As the chaos of battle settled into quiet aftermath, Elara allowed herself a moment to breathe deeply, processing the weight of what had just occurred. Years of fear, exile, and quiet suffering culminated in this single, decisive moment, a moment where she had finally reclaimed control over her own destiny. Alden turned toward her, concern evident in his expression despite their clear victory. Are you all right? I think so, she replied softly, relief washing over her as adrenaline slowly faded. It's strange, facing him after all these years, and realizing he no longer holds any power over me. You did that yourself, Alden said gently, through your own strength and determination. We did it together, she corrected, offering him a genuine smile. As soldiers began securing Draven and his remaining forces, Corwin approached them both, visibly relieved by the battle's conclusion. Well fought, both of you, he said warmly. I don't think anyone here will soon forget what we witnessed today. Elara glanced around at the soldiers nearby, many of whom regarded her now with clear admiration and respect, a stark contrast from the cautious skepticism she had initially encountered upon her arrival. Thank you, she said quietly, genuinely moved by the acknowledgement. No, Corwin replied firmly. Thank you, for showing us all exactly what true courage looks like. As Draven was led away under heavy guard, Elara felt a profound sense of closure settle deeply within her. The shadow that had haunted her for years, controlling her fears and dictating her isolation, had finally been confronted directly and decisively overcome. Later that evening, as the pack house began settling into quiet recovery following the intense battle, Alden found Elara standing alone near the courtyard, gazing thoughtfully toward the star-filled sky above. You seem deep in thought, he observed, approaching quietly. Just reflecting, she replied softly, on everything that's happened since that night in the forest. A lot has changed, Alden agreed, standing beside her. I never imagined I'd find this kind of peace, she admitted, or trust for that matter. Alden studied her closely, noticing the genuine contentment reflected clearly in her expression. You've earned every bit of it, he said gently. Elara turned toward him, her eyes reflecting quiet gratitude and something deeper, something she no longer felt hesitant to acknowledge openly. Thank you, Alden, for seeing strength in me, even when I struggled to see it myself. You've always had that strength, he replied softly. I simply helped you recognize it. Standing together beneath the quiet night sky, both finally allowed themselves a moment of genuine peace. The weight of years of fear and uncertainty finally lifted, replaced instead by hopeful possibility and quiet, unspoken affection. Yet even amid this newfound peace, Elara understood clearly that Draven's defeat marked not an ending, but rather a new beginning, one where she would finally have the opportunity to build a life defined not by fear and isolation, but by genuine strength, connection, and belonging. In the days following the battle, the pack house buzzed with a different kind of energy, one born from relief and renewed hope rather than fear and tension. Soldiers who had once regarded Elara with cautious curiosity now greeted her warmly, acknowledging openly the crucial role she had played in securing their victory. Draven, along with his remaining loyal warriors, was held under careful guard, while Alden's council determined appropriate consequences for his actions. Alara found herself asked to testify before the council, recounting details of her exile and subsequent years of isolation, information vital in ensuring justice was properly served. Standing before the assembled council, she spoke clearly and confidently, her voice steady despite the weight of memories she revisited. Draven exiled me out of fear, she explained, fear of strength he didn't understand, and later, fear turned to greed once he realized the value of what he'd cast aside. The council listened intently, several members exchanging troubled glances as the full extent of Draven's actions became clear. Ultimately, they determined he would be stripped of his title and authority, exiled permanently from any position of leadership, a fitting consequence given the very fate he had once forced upon her. Following the council's decision, Alara felt a profound sense of closure. The past finally settled, and resolved in a manner that offered genuine justice rather than mere vengeance. "How do you feel?" Alden asked gently, finding her afterward in the quiet solitude of the courtyard. "Relieved," she admitted, "and oddly peaceful. I always imagined this moment differently, filled with anger or triumph, but instead, I just feel like a weight has finally lifted." "That's understandable," Alden replied. "Justice often brings peace rather than triumph." Alara nodded thoughtfully, appreciating his understanding. Over the following weeks, she settled more fully into life within the pack house, no longer merely a guest awaiting an uncertain future, but an active and respected member of the community. Corwin approached her one afternoon with an unexpected proposal. "The king and council have been discussing your future here," he said carefully. "Given your skills and clear leadership potential, they've proposed a formal position training our warriors." Alara blinked in surprise. "Me? Training soldiers?" "Your insight and experience have already proven invaluable," Corwin explained. "It would only make sense to formalize your role." She considered the proposal carefully, recognizing the significance of such an offer. For years, she had been dismissed, exiled, and forced into isolation due to perceived weakness. Now, she was being offered genuine respect and responsibility, a stark and welcome contrast to her painful past. "I accept," she said finally, determination clear in her voice. Alden, upon hearing the news, greeted her with genuine warmth. "I couldn't think of anyone better suited for the role," he said sincerely. "Thank you for believing in me," she replied softly, "even when I doubted myself." Their relationship, having grown steadily deeper through shared trials and mutual support, continued evolving naturally into something neither had explicitly named, yet both clearly recognized as significant. Quiet moments shared during training sessions, thoughtful conversations exchanged during peaceful evenings, gradually solidified a bond built upon genuine respect, trust, and affection. One evening, following a particularly demanding training session, Alden found Alara resting quietly near the edge of the training grounds, watching the sunset paint vibrant colors across the sky. "You've settled in remarkably well," he observed, sitting beside her. "I have you to thank for that," she replied warmly. "You gave me a chance no one else ever did." "You earned that chance yourself," Alden said gently. "I merely offered the opportunity." Alara turned toward him, her expression thoughtful. "Alden, can I ask you something?" "Of course," he replied, curiosity evident in his tone. "Why did you truly intervene that night in the forest? You could have simply ridden past, avoided involvement entirely." Alden considered her question carefully before responding. "Because the moment I saw you fighting alone, refusing to give up despite impossible odds, I recognized something rare and valuable. Courage like yours deserved protection and respect, not indifference." His honesty resonated deeply within her, reaffirming the genuine connection they had built together through weeks of shared trials and quiet trust. "I'm grateful you did," she said softly, meeting his gaze steadily. "So am I," Alden replied, his voice gentle, yet filled with genuine sincerity. As the sun set fully behind the horizon, casting soft shadows across the peaceful courtyard, Alara felt a profound sense of contentment settle deeply within her, a feeling she had rarely allowed herself throughout years of isolation and fear. For the first time since her exile, she felt genuinely at peace, surrounded by people who respected and valued her, in a place she now proudly called home. Yet amid this newfound peace and belonging, she recognized clearly that her journey toward healing and acceptance was far from over, but rather just beginning, filled with hopeful possibilities she had never before dared to imagine. As night fully descended upon the pack house, Elara allowed herself, finally, to embrace hope fully, trusting that whatever challenges awaited her future, she would face them not alone, but alongside those who had proven, time and again, their genuine care and support. Months passed since Draven's defeat, and the pack house had transformed into something Elara once believed impossible, a genuine home. Her role-training soldiers had grown steadily, her methods respected and admired throughout the ranks. Warriors who once doubted an untitled Omega now sought her guidance eagerly, recognizing the value of skills forged through genuine hardship and resilience. On a quiet morning, Elara stood before a group of new recruits, demonstrating a defensive technique she had once used out of desperate necessity. Her movements were fluid, confident, entirely different from the frightened, isolated girl who had once fought alone in a forest clearing. "Balance first," she instructed calmly, correcting a young recruit's stance. "Strength means nothing without control." The recruits listened intently, absorbing lessons that carried far more weight than simple technique, lessons born from genuine survival and hard-earned wisdom. Later that day, Alden observed her training session from a distance, admiration clear in his expression as he watched her guide the young warriors patiently and confidently. Corwin approached him quietly, following his gaze. "She's become quite remarkable," Corwin observed. "She always was," Alden replied softly. "It simply took the right environment to help her realize it." As the training session concluded, Elara noticed Alden watching from afar and approached him with a warm smile. "Something on your mind?" she asked playfully. "Just admiring your progress," he replied honestly. "You've come remarkably far." "We've come far," she corrected gently, echoing sentiments they had shared many times since their initial encounter. Their relationship, having deepened steadily over months of shared experiences, had blossomed into something neither hesitated to acknowledge openly any longer. Genuine affection and mutual respect had grown naturally between them, evident clearly to everyone within the pack house. That evening, Alden invited Elara to join him for a quiet dinner, a simple gathering, meant to celebrate the pack's continued peace and prosperity following months of recovery and rebuilding. "I wanted to discuss something important with you," Alden said, once they settled comfortably at the table. "Oh?" Elara replied curiously. "The council has been discussing your future here," he continued. "Given your accomplishments and clear leadership, they've proposed formally recognizing you within pack leadership, not simply as a trainer, but as an equal voice among our advisors." Elara's eyes widened slightly in surprise. "Truly? You've more than earned it," Alden said sincerely. "Your insight, your courage, your unwavering dedication to protecting others, these qualities define true leadership." She considered his words carefully, deeply moved by the genuine recognition and respect finally offered to her. "I accept," she said firmly, gratitude evident in her voice. "I'm proud of you," Alden said warmly, reaching gently for her hand across the table. Elara felt warmth spread through her at his touch, a stark contrast from the isolation and fear that had defined her existence for so long. "Thank you," she said softly, "for giving me this chance, for believing in me from the very beginning." "You've always deserved it," Alden replied gently. "I simply provided the opportunity for others to see clearly what I recognized instantly." Their conversation continued warmly throughout the evening, filled with genuine laughter, shared memories, and quiet reflection upon the challenging journey that had brought them together. As dinner concluded, Alden walked her outside beneath the clear night sky, stars scattered brightly overhead. "Elara," he said softly, pausing beneath the peaceful night sky, "I've come to care for you deeply, more than I initially expected when we first met." She turned toward him, her heart racing gently at his sincere admission. "I feel the same," she admitted softly. "You've given me more than protection or opportunity, Alden. You've given me genuine belonging, something I feared I would never find again." Alden reached gently for her hand, his eyes reflecting genuine warmth and affection. "Then let us continue building that belonging together, as equals, as partners." Elara smiled warmly, her heart finally at peace after years of fear, isolation, and uncertainty. Together, she agreed softly, I would like nothing more. As they stood quietly beneath the vast night sky, hand in hand, both recognized clearly the significance of the journey that had brought them to this moment. From a chance encounter in a dark forest clearing, to a genuine partnership built upon mutual respect, trust, and deep affection, their story had evolved into something neither could have anticipated, yet both now cherished deeply. The following months brought continued growth and prosperity to the pack house, Elara's leadership and guidance shaping a new generation of warriors, while her partnership with Alden flourished steadily into a relationship built upon genuine equality, respect, and love. Word spread throughout neighboring territories of the remarkable young woman who had risen from exile and isolation to become one of the most respected leaders within Alden's kingdom, her story inspiring others who had similarly faced hardship and rejection. Elara often reflected upon her journey, from a frightened, exiled girl fighting desperately alone, to a confident leader, surrounded by genuine friends, allies, and love. She understood clearly now that true strength was never about avoiding vulnerability or hardship entirely, but rather about facing those challenges honestly, with resilience, courage, and the willingness to trust others when trust was rightfully earned. Standing proudly beside Alden during a peaceful gathering celebrating their continued prosperity, Elara looked out at the warriors she had trained, the community she had helped build, and the man she had come to love deeply, feeling profound gratitude for the unexpected journey that had led her here. What had begun as a shocking encounter between a poor, exiled girl fighting alone and a king who refused to look away had blossomed into a story of resilience, redemption, and genuine belonging, proving clearly that true strength often emerges, not despite hardship, but because of the courage to face it directly, and the willingness to embrace connection and trust along the way.